Welcome to the C-Suite Marketing Perspectives podcast. I'm Steve McDonald, your host. Today, we have an incredible opportunity to learn from a four-time B2B CMO. We have on Dave Karel, and Dave, you are the CMO currently of Crunchtime. One of the things that you're going to be talking about today, but I want to ask you a little bit more to elaborate on your background. But one of the things we're going to be talking about here is really, why is B2B marketing breaking down? Why is what was happening yesterday, what was working, what we've relied on for so many years, why is it no longer working? So that's what we're going to get into. But before we do that, maybe you could just expand a little bit more on your background versus what I said there.
Sure, Steve. Thanks for having me. I've been a B2B tech marketer for a while now. I call it the first decade. I grew up as product marketer. As a marketing exec, that still remains core to my DNA of who I am and my sensibilities and how I approach the job. I took the leap to running marketing teams probably about 15 years ago. My experience ranges from being the first marketer in the door and having to build out teams from scratch and building out quite scaled teams. I've had the chance to scale through multiple levels of growth, which, as you mentioned, I'm currently at Crunchtime. We have a pretty scaled global go-to-market today with multiple product lines and a pretty significant domestic international business and all the kind of complexities that it takes to support that from a marketing perspective. I'm a New Yorker originally, but I came out to Silicon Valley about 25 years ago, and here I'm with my wife, and I have two teen daughters.
Oh, fantastic. If that wasn't enough to keep you busy, your job at two teen daughters on top of it.
That's right. Sure.
Well, let me just get right out and ask you the question. What is it that was working before that isn't working going forward?
Sounds good. So it's a pretty bold statement to say things aren't working. It's degrees and nuances, and I think it's all kind of frame of reference from where we've come, and that expectations have gone up really fast, right? Faster than I think a lot of us. And when I say expectations, the people we're trying to sell to, all of us as buyers, our expectations have risen of what we expect from folks trying to engage with us, and things have risen probably faster than we all want to acknowledge. And the same old things that we've been doing for a while now don't work as well. To say what's not working, what's breaking down, I think it's good to give historical frame of reference. Go back to 2010-ish, and that's when I had the chance to take over marketing for the first time and run a marketing team. I really think it was a marketing renaissance. I feel really lucky that I was coming of age as a marketing leader in this time where you had so many tools and best practices coming of age or just on the horizon. From a technology perspective, you had marketing automation systems that were really taking hold, and were no longer these things on the periphery. They became almost central to the nervous system of how marketing was done. Same goes for things like webinar platforms and website content management systems that allow us to scale those things. Different techniques and practices like content marketing or funnel optimization, just the concept of trying to track all the work you're doing through a methodical set of phases and how you're working and handing off to the sales team. All that became quite formalized, I think, during this period. And then you had all these emerging channels, like different ways to reach our prospects, right? Through social and online communities. So this all allowed, again, our time capsule allowed the most innovative marketers to kind of leap ahead and take a first mover advantage back then. But over time, and I think it's done a really good job, all the things up leveling everybody else. That's kind of where I think fast forward to how are things breaking down. So now fast forward, all these things have become very mainstream. They've gradually become, I call blunt instruments, because they become overused or not used very elegantly, causing the breakdown. We have these old tricks that don't work as well anymore. Again, that's probably because of all of us art buyers in our consumer lives. We're like using a lot of technology as consumers, and we expect more. So when we have these B2B plays hitting us, they're quite jarring.
We're all trained these days, as CMOs. We're supposed to be very, very revenue focused, pipeline, deep penetration in the pipeline focused, and focused on marketing attribution. We have to prove, right, that as this massive cost center in the company, that we're actually doing something, we're promoting, we're actually creating revenue. So where does that break down? Where is it that the technology that we're all putting in and the focus on the tech stack, and where is that not serving us in the way that you think that it should?
I think, again, these tools and the best among us that have set the bar of that, hey, it's possible actually not to just measure our success and our work based on like leads, right? It's possible to actually track the impact we're having on sales and revenue. So I think there's a good blueprint and roadmap for how to do that. Me and my team, that over time, we're guilty as well as we sometimes can't resist setting our bar a little too low For example, when we're running campaigns, like all of us have gotten pretty good over time at creating an ebook of some sort. And most of them can look pretty good. Setting up a 4-step email nurture campaign, spending some dollars on LinkedIn to promote it, sharing it out on other social channels. A decade ago, that would be pretty good. You'd elevate yourself above the noise and you probably get pretty good results. And if you, on the attribution, if you are tooling up your organization, you'd be able to measure some of that down funnel. I think today we got to ask ourselves, what are we trying to accomplish when we're doing that? I'll say it this way. I feel their low bar can be defined as this, like most of us are still trying to get prospects to fill out a form. We're grading ourselves at capturing someone's information, and that it's almost a security blanket we can't let hold of saying, I'm justifying the money and the time I spent on that because look at these leads. And that feels good. A higher bar would be, as I'm putting that nice enough looking ebook out into the world, are people actually reading it? Are they engaging in that? What's going to start separating your brand from the rest? So that medium bar, some of us are doing pretty well there. Then you've got the rare air, right? The higher bar, which I think is hard. It's hard, easy to say, hard in practice, is as you're engaging people with programs and content, are you getting them to think differently? Are you getting them to actually, they were running along perfectly happy thinking about some topic in a certain way. Did you get them to pause and think about it differently? So going back to your question of like how we're measuring ourselves, I think there's still too much of us grabbing onto that security blanket of counting things like leads, and not are we fundamentally helping sales, because people don't want to speak to salespeople. They want to hold off on that actual sales conversation as long as possible. Is marketing doing a job of helping to engage and get people to think differently about topics? And we just got to ask ourselves, again, we're all buyers. We're all hit by these kind of messages. What's going to get us to pause and take time out of our days? You and I we've had a whole calendar full of stuff planned. What's going to cause us to stop and take moments to think, to spend time on something and to think differently?
You said so much in there that I'm excited about. Yeah, you just nodded to this trend of the self-service B2B buyer, right? And it's not only a trend, it's just a reality, right? It's like over 70% of them are making their decision down to who's on their consideration list, right? Before they're ever even want to talk to anybody in the organization. So I agree, where it used to be like fill out forms, right? We get leads. These are MQLs. We throw them over the wall. Everybody's happy, right? Well, problem is, the vast majority of people don't fill out forms. Right? They know what's going to happen on the end of that. As a result, things like ebooks are declining. But one of the biggest elephants in the room, which you mentioned was content, is we can talk about all the tactics of the tech stack and following marketing attribution. But if we're not changing the way they think, reframing the conversation, giving them something to consider, so that we can actually get into that buyer's journey earlier, right? We got to spark conversations. And Forbes put it fantastic. They said, content marketing solves problems, thought leadership sparks conversations. And so I wanted to run something by, get your thought on this, because it seems like in today's day and age, one of the things that's very different, why it's breaking down, is because marketing is actually playing a stronger, more important role in the sales process. If the buyer is waiting longer to talk to our sales team, then it's incumbent upon us to engage with them, give them something to consider, to think about differently, to reframe that conversation. Otherwise, we're not going to be a part of the conversation.
I think that's it. It's really simple. Getting good at marketing is really straightforward, and it's going to sound trite, but it's getting the right message in front of the right people at the right time. Super easy to say. I think what bottlenecks in practice, the number one thing that will have us all stumble is audience prioritization. It's really hard to get good at putting the right message and content in front. If you try to say too much to everybody, you say nothing of value to anybody. So I think we're having a hard time with our sales partners or any executive team, and even the board of directors that sits behind a lot of companies, narrowing our focus, right? Because we're almost afraid. Placing bets is scary. Like, and when I talk, let's be really specific. You have a choice. Like at Crunchtime, we target multiple segments within the industries that we're targeting. We've got to choose to get right messaging and content. We got to choose. We have a pretty robust product portfolio. Which products are we going to lead with? We can't lead with everything. You can't put a bright spotlight on 8 products. It's going to dim out, right? You need to focus. hopefully wherever you're trying to sell in the market has a range of value propositions that you can provide. What's going to get emphasis? All these things are choices you have to make in terms of go to market. And restraint is hard because if you place the wrong bets, it feels really risky. The downside is it's a slippery slope. You try to do too much, the team is stretched, things are going to break down as you're trying to execute. You start to miss your numbers. And ironically, as you start to miss numbers, there's like this reaction, like do more, which means you're going to you'll be even less focused. Right. I agree wholeheartedly around the marketing has this huge opportunity in this last X number of years as buying habits have changed to fill that void where sales teams don't have the ability to engage as early as they used to. We've just got to be able to have that restraint around like, where's our focus? So we can get really good at messaging and storytelling to a narrower set of audiences.
I just had a conversation the other day with a CMO, and he said, Steve, the sales team's coming to me and they're saying, hey, we need to get to the boss of the person that we're talking to. And I need your help doing that. His point of view was that that's kind of your job, right? Well, the problem here is actually the job is for marketing to spark conversations, whoever the right ICP is, right? It's incumbent upon us to raise their eyebrow, give them something to consider, something to pause about, something that's going to help them in their job. Right? It may be directly related to the products and the value propositions that we're selling, but it has there's a halo around that too that we can engage with them. Anything we can do to help them in their job that elevates us as that stature, that expert, that trusted advisor, right? Very proven, many studies, B2B buyers, they don't want to talk to salespeople. They want to talk to trusted advisors. The other thing was another conversation, this is a few months ago, I was talking to the CMOs, and she said, we've got 9 different ICPs. And then there's different industry segments within those ICPs, and there's this big matrix. And the problem there was, to your point, trying to do too much, right? Part of that bet is even what is the right ICPs to be going after?
Yeah. Anyone that's listening to this podcast, they know that you and the executive team, if you're a marketing leadership, your counterparts in sales, collectively, you all know a lot. Like you probably in your gut, and you can get data supported, you kind of know your ranked order of where you should be going and focusing. If you can just have restraint and place bets, then let's drill down a little further. Like, what do you do with that? Right. And it is around promoting self-education. Let's paint a picture. If I'm a marketer working for a mid-size tech company and B2B based here in California, Boston-based company, all the things that I am somehow fit into someone you're trying to sell to. The reality is, how are you going to sell to me? Well, I might be sitting in my living room with my wife next to me watching a show on Netflix at 11 o'clock. And I see my wife fell asleep. So I, of course, have to turn the show off really quickly because we want people to watch that show together. So there I am at 11 o'clock and I open my laptop because that's when I'm going to finish some work that's on my plate. And I have some note from some vendor that can try to hit me, and maybe it's an ebook, maybe who knows what it is, but it's something I've registered, and I take time to go to that website at 11 o'clock at night. When that experience, whatever it is, going to your website or going to whatever content experience you've created to try to educate me on whatever messages I've been hit with over the past weeks or months, if I can have everything I have at my fingertips in an experience that is engaging and allows me to kind of select my own journey to get the information I want, there's an opportunity before I get off that couch to accelerate a buy process by months, right? I might get off the couch at 11:15 and be like, that might change the priority of what I'm going to do the next day. In contrast, if I go to wherever you're trying to send me and I can't get what I think I need, and there's some gate to that, I close my laptop, I go to sleep, I wake up and I wait to my 8 scheduled Zoom meetings or all the things I need to do, I might not think about this. So the buy process is now extended for months and months and may never happen. So that's the opportunity. You need to catch people when they're in the headspace that they want to learn. These are obvious, intuitive things. We know that as consumers ourselves, but it's actually placing bets to get better at that.
What's your opinion around the whole gated versus non-gated? The example you just gave there was what would happen if it wasn't gated and you just had access to what you wanted versus was gated and the laptop closed?
Yeah, I used it more gated. I was thinking more gated as if you haven't put all the information I might need. Like, sure, for an ebook, like it'd be good if I don't have to. Maybe I'm shy. I'm just not going to give you my personal information. I just don't. Maybe it's just not what I do. Afraid I'm going to get hit. That means I'm not going to look at that content. So that's one form of being gated. Another way of being gated is I can't access pricing, or it's really hard for me to understand how other customers that look like me have actually used this. Maybe I'm bumping too early into a process. It's like, oh, call a sales, call us. And well, if you're interested in more information, call us. And I'm like, okay, I put on my list of 400 things to do to call, but of course I never get to that. So it's more gated by lack of accessible information.
There's two different parts. There's the part that got you there, and then there's the part, the experience and the self-exploration afterwards. Let's talk about both of those. The part to get you there, right? The messaging, you talked earlier about changing the way that I think. And, that to me is that product marketing? Is this thought leadership? How do you turn I'm going to reframe that conversation. I'm going to change the way that you're thinking about X, Y, and Z. And then how do you think about creating that content?
I'll answer it in a little different way. There's tried and true ways of creating good content. And I think it's focus, understanding your audience, persona development, talking to subject matter experts, all that stuff that helps you kind of say, ultimately, I want to be helpful in what I'm creating. And there's ways to kind of make sure I'm matching the right content with the right people. But to earn the right to even get in that game, like to be credible, I think you have to back up and say, why would someone take time to read my content? If they read it, it'll be helpful. And I think whereas like we talked earlier in our conversation around a lot of these tools like marketing automation, and these have become quite democratized. Like they're very accessible now. You can bring junior people onto your team and they can take advantage of these. And so anyone can up level. Whether or not they're using these tools very well, it's another story, but everyone has a chance to use them. I think the next big frontier is around narrative, who you are and how you tell your story, positioning and messaging, the words you're using to talk about your company and your product, and brand, just the visual identity that you put out in the market, the collection of everything that you are. If you want someone, again, that story of me sitting on the couch and having a few minutes at 11 o'clock at night, if there's a company that has been really crisp and differentiated in how they're describing what they do, and they've been doing that, I've gone to a trade show or I've been to a webinar, or I'm hearing peers talk about this solution provider. They've been able to rise above the noise, not because they have great content or even because they have a big product. It's how they're coming across is different than all the noise, different from everything else I've used before, and really compelling in how they can help. So I think that is actually the going forward, that's the big differentiator across B2B marketing. It's because people just don't do that very well. And they don't do it very well for two reasons. One, I think it's underappreciated. Very often you have a CEO, founder, or the executive team, they feel, oh, I know how to tell this story. There's someone that feels very comfortable. They've been talking to a lot of prospects, or they were there, whoever sold the early deals in the company, they figure they got it, right? So there's an underappreciation in it. The other is others might appreciate it. It's just a talent bottleneck. You kind of have to hire seasoned people, which costs money. That maybe if you can invest in hiring someone that's going to bring in more leads and hire like demand gen growth side, or hire someone who's going to be really good at storytelling. Sometimes you could choose one. People are generally saying, well, I got to get leads.
Right. Right.
I think it's less about formulating the content. It's about earning the right for someone to pay it to look in your direction. I think that's more about narrative messaging and branding.
Well, you went exactly where I think the conversation should go here, because here's the bottom line stats. 2/3 of the content that marketing creates, sales doesn't think has any value. Over 70% of the narrative or the thought leadership, I'm going to change the way you think, content, B2B buyers don't think has any value. So as an industry, we're not even getting a C, we're getting like a D, right? In terms of content. Yet the buyer is relying more and more, consuming more and more content before they want to talk to us. So put ourselves in their shoes. Must be an incredibly frustrating And we've all been buyers, right? We bought our own tech stack. We put it together. We've had vendors sell us, right? We know how frustrating that can be. So the question is, and I think you highlighted this, is most companies don't create that level of content. And for internal reasons, staffing reasons, but I think the third one is it's just hard to create.
Yeah.
Right? Constantly, because when 95% of your market isn't in the market to buy at the moment, that means you're constantly nurturing, which means you're constantly creating high value content like this, right? So there's a never ending need to do it. So there's an insatiable appetite that needs to be filled with this kind of content. And that's a tough order to fill, right? Relying on outside subject matter experts, because most of the subject matter experts internally typically tend to be very product focused and can talk about our babies or tech, right? So how do we get that level of high level content? I think that's one of the biggest issues facing B2B marketing today.
Yeah.
And I think you highlighted it. It's really difficult to create that content.
Well, so it's not for me to come across like the Debbie Downer of B2B marketing tech. I think that the same renaissance that like I experienced, I think we're about to go through something that's quite extraordinary with AI. So I'll say the AI word here. I think that is the same way I think all the marketing automation and advent of other kind of tools help to democratize how people kind of go out and cost effectively reach audiences. I think AI is going to help us do some up level teams that never maybe didn't have it in their DNA to do the storytelling and to scale good content and scale good messaging. On the topic of AI, I don't know, I think personally, I feel like it's too much happening too fast for me to make total sense of like extrapolating where this will fit on my team and how we're going to use it and how it's going to change, honestly, the job of the marketing professional. But that said, I think the tea leaves scream pretty loudly that AI is going to have this like play a big part in how go to market works, right? And I think beyond marketing automation systems, when I kind of think about this and talking with peers and friends about it, I think it's going to have even more dramatic effect on up-leveling teams. It's going to enable like the product marketers and content marketers and brand marketers and growth marketers all to move faster while making a big impact. If the same way all these other tools I mentioned help to make more efficient how you orchestrate marketing activities and track marketing activities, I think AI in this world can help us scale, allow us to be helpful at scale. Maybe that's a way to say it. We can be helpful at scale. To date, it's been really hard to be helpful because it's like it takes the subject matter experts. It takes the person who's really good at messaging and writing content. It takes restraint.
Yes.
Actually, this whole restraint thing, you're not going to be as restrained if you have some of these AI tools that allow you to do all this stuff faster. So the game does change quite a bit, I think, over the next months and short number of years here.
You're absolutely right. We have to get more efficient and scalable at creating content and the right kind of content. And AI absolutely has a massive role in that. It doesn't replace subject matter experts, right? It doesn't replace AI tends to work its best when you have good input to get into that AI process, right? In the technology. So it's an exciting time. There's no doubt about it. While we're on this subject, I asked this question on all my podcasts, and I just want to ask it, to kind of get a line in the sand, to kind of relative understand the importance of what we're talking about here. If you had to rate the importance of content to the overall growth and sustainability of the company, your company, Crunchtime, right? B2B companies.
Yeah.
How important is it? 1, it's not important at all. 10, it's vital to the overall growth and sustainability of the company. How would you rate that and why?
So, all right. So 1 to 10, I'll give it an 11, but I'll give it a qualifier.
Okay.
All right. I think we've been kind of hitting on some of these themes, but we have to step back from thinking of that our teams have done a good job of content just by creating and shipping a lot of it. It's what does it mean to create good content? I think it's creating content that reinforces credibility of our company narrative that we're a trusted partner.
Mhm.
I think it's content that's been developed with the aim of getting someone to think differently and not just We talked before, like with that higher bar, get someone to think differently, not just to fill out a form. We're not spreading the content peanut butter too thin. We're placing bet on a particular audience or audiences so we can develop better content. So it's audience restraint. And then, bonus points if you can make that content accessible in the way, the story of me sitting on a couch wanting to get at information quickly at night. Bonus points if you can get really good at that.
Yes.
If
So
you do all that, then the importance of content is an 11, right? And it's going to help not just marketing teams, but fundamentally, this is all about helping sales teams. It's helping sales teams. We're getting people ready to speak to sales and setting up really productive sales conversations.
in that vein, there was a CMO that came onto the podcast, and she said that if done right, not only does, today's brand is tomorrow's demand, setting up for the sales, but that it actually takes cycles away from the sales process. Because if we create the brand, we establish the expertise as trusted advisors as the company, then the salesperson doesn't have to do as much time or spend as much time devoted to that. They are bequeathed that more and more. So it literally takes cycles away from the ABM process if done right. So I agree 100%.
This is a joint effort, right? So all the stuff that's being created, you're not tapping the value of it if it's marketing to shipping stuff. This is something it's tightly centralized, where AEs and BDRs or SDRs are leveraging the same messaging and the same content in their own outreach. And they're really trained and enabled to be able to do that. So not just marketing trying to be helpful from the air cover, but it's reps in their outreach, enabling them to be as helpful as possible by leveraging the same differentiated messaging and how they describe the company and the solutions and the same content.
So we've talked about so much. If there was one takeaway that you wanted to leave everybody with, what would that be?
One thing, I guess, at the core, affecting back to like where I think we started the conversation, affecting the B2B buying process is actually really, really simple. You just need to be credible and helpful. And if you can actually coordinate your go-to-market effort, sales and marketing, like locking arms with just the sole focus of, are we being credible and helpful? You're setting up a home run. You're going to be doing so much better than most other teams are able to do.
Fantastic. Dave, thank you so much for coming on. I know there's probably going to be lots of questions, and if people wanted to get a hold of you, would it be appropriate that we gave out a link to your profile on LinkedIn?
Absolutely. Yeah. I love talking shop. So I welcome anyone reaching out.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming on and sharing all of your insights.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Steve. Great conversation.